Well, we have a major trust issue apparently here in Australia on data that is being gathered. Often we are giving permission for this data to be gathered. It might be, well, the loyalty card you have in your wallet for your supermarket, your airline, whatever it might be, the little box you tick at the bottom saying, yes, I agree to the terms and conditions. Just what does that mean exactly, and how unhappy are voters at the moment with what is being gathered not just by companies but also by the government as well? Peter Lewis is the director of the newly launched Centre for Responsible Technology in conjunction with the Australia Institute. I spoke with him earlier. Peter Lewis, thanks for your time. Can we start by talking about what data is being collected here by companies? First of all, what's an example of what's being hoovered up here?
It really is limited to the capacity of the platform you're visiting. So if you're on a social media platform, you've given consent to the patterns of your usage on that platform.
This is the thing that you tick and never read properly.
Absolutely. A lot of sites you go to will say, will you accept cookies? Cookies are embedded little codes that follow you around the internet and then send the messages back to the host website.
Which means one website knows what you visited after and then figures out what they should target at you.
Or the survey you might fill out online where or the robocall you might answer where the information is then taken and modelled against the rest of the information they've got about you. So there's these companies that are building up more and more information about the individuals, all based on a consent that people don't really think about when they click the box to get on the line. And at the end of that journey, you might be sold, or pitch products that you may or may not want. But there are a whole lot of models going on as well that are about shifting your behaviour online and offline, and ultimately also collecting information that sort of makes you vulnerable as a worker in the long term as well.
I mean, people tick on the yes. Polling suggests that they're still not happy with the harvesting of data. I guess I'm interested as well in, you see these things pop up sporadically, and I don't think it's real at all, but people have, I do not give Facebook permission to use my photos, and it starts getting used again and again online. So people aren't happy with what's happening, but they're still technically allowing them to do so.
Yeah, there's this. I think we're starting to get a sense of what informed consent might look like. So if it is just a tick box with a whole bunch of legal information and someone clicks it, yes, legally they've consented, but they don't really understand what's going on. And what's interesting about the data we've put out today, which is part of a project with the Australia Institute's Centre for Responsible Technology, is that there is a massive disconnect between what people feel comfortable with giving up and the fact that they're actually willfully giving it up. So there is a disconnect between what you think's okay and what you say is okay to be taken off you. So, a little bit about it is about consumers being more aware, but I think there is also a bit more of a responsibility on some of these platforms to be more upfront with what
and this is what's supposed to be happening with reforms already, upfront and simple. Make it easy for people to understand what they're giving away, rather than 68 pages and, point C7 subsection 8 is the key bit that you're not reading.
But although one of the problems is, as was pointed out at a roundtable we held yesterday, that the way the data is being used is so complex that to explain how it's going to be used, and let's also, I made the mistake then, it's not data, it's personal information.
Right.
You call it data, it sounds technical and sort of stuff that you don't really need to know about. Your personal information is being used in so many varied ways, it may well take 65 pages of legalese to actually explain all the ways it's being used.
But you might at least be able to get some dot points at the start to...
Like a nice
Well, ideally.
Yeah.
What about the extent to which companies are being upfront or otherwise? From an anecdotal point of view, I'm always saying, do I have to give you my email address? And it might be a hotel or whatever, and they say, it won't be used for marketing, and then it starts coming in as marketing. Hey, we've got 10% off rooms in Easter, and you say, I told them I didn't want this. I mean, do they
really
just lie?
Point. So giving up our information has almost become a way of life, and a lot of organisations are collecting this and they don't even know what they're doing with it. They've just been told it's oil because at some stage you're going to be iron. One of my propositions is it oil or is it uranium, and is it something that's dangerous to hold, impossible to dispose of, so should we be collecting less of it? One of the problems we've got at the moment is we don't even have a language, I think, for what's okay and what's not okay. So one of the propositions we're putting forward for businesses that want to say they treat their customers with respect are, what are the guardrails? What are the red lines you're not going to cross? Like maybe collecting less of our personal information actually should be one of their value propositions when they want us to go and use their services online.
And yet, well, there's so many things online, and I would argue in person as well. Online, it'll have an asterisk, so you've got to give them that. And you think, oh, well, I want this, I guess I have to do it. But in person, you're made to feel as if you're being strange by saying, why do you need my email? It's almost like you're being confrontational. And it's not personal. You just say, I want to stop giving this thing out.
And then look at your email feed. It's just full of everything coming back at you, which has made that, what was a fantastic communication channel, so clogged up, it's hardly useful anymore.
How does what the government collects now compare with what companies collect?
Well, obviously, government's got a broader fiat, and the companies require consent. Often the government's passing legislation that give the agencies the authority to collect all sorts of things. And, you know, there's a longer-term analysis that says a lot of this occurred after 9/11. Government in America and then in Australia took the view that to protect citizens, they needed to expand the amount of information. That really created the model that then Google and Facebook has weaponised for commercial purposes. But the question is national security such an ephemeral term now that it's okay to take anything? So facial recognition, which is the technology that's developing quickly. Should cameras capture people's faces in the name of national security?
So, and the polling suggests that people are very worried about facial recognition. When you talk about what it's supposed to be used for initially, they talk about, only certain perhaps major incidents or around airports, and people just don't believe that's the end of it, that people assume mission creep.
And even when and the questions we've put out we were even saying in the interest of national security or in the interest of protecting children from pornography online.
Right, that was the preface in the question.
People were still, even at that point, people aren't comfortable with the scope of, I guess, the collapse between what's ours and what's theirs. So, you look at how China is using facial recognition to build individual social credit scores. I think people are starting to see the line. And so what... Again, I think this is becoming a political issue, and it's really heartening to see some of the ways in which the Morrison government is pushing back on some of the big tech corporations at the moment. But
and against Home Affairs as well. I mean, this is the other proposition, for example, that they want to make sure people give facial ID to look up pornography in the country, which is one idea out there now.
Yeah, and looking at it from one perspective, if your only objective was to stop kids accessing porn, it bears scrutiny, but it's all the consequences and the beachhead it provides, which I think is concerning people. So what's really heartening and I think intriguing about these findings are people are starting to wake up to the idea that this almost data gold rush has to be constrained in some way. And if at the end of this, the very first step is not to regulate these companies out of existence, but it's to start creating protocols and language so that we can understand what of ours we should be giving up and what they shouldn't be taking.
And I guess it comes back to you don't want people to lose trust in this. Companies can use data for good. We all like getting offers that are relevant to our lifestyles, I would argue. If they're limited and you can go, hey, it is great to see when this is on discount, that's good for me. For governments, I think a great example has got to be online health records, digital health records. This could be a lifesaver. You go to a doctor, you can't remember what happened 5 years ago, what you're actually allergic to, what that procedure was, and that can save your life, and yet there's a lack of trust in that system.
And, it was a classic, wasn't it? The failure of the My Health Record rollout was really a sign of a breakdown of social contract with government to handle data. And one of the problems was that part of the terms of that wasn't just to have a file sharing service between practitioners. The platform was going to allow entrepreneurs to innovate and take all that data and turn it into new products. So one of the questions people need to ask themselves when they take part in a transaction is the purpose of the transaction what I think it is, or is it just a way of hoovering up information about me that I might not be comfortable giving up?